Welcome to the Painting Coach. I'm Lloyd, and today we have another epic tutorial where I show you how to paint Prince Vhordrai, Lord of the Crimson Keep, atop his undead Draconith, Shordemaire. A huge thank you to Games Workshop for sending me this model early so that I can create this painting tutorial for you. Now, there's lots to get through, so let's get painting. The first thing I've done is kept everything in sub-assembly, so let me show you those. First up, we've got Shordemaire the Draconith, and I've primed this with Ossified Earth from Colourforge. It's essentially the same colour as Morghast Bone, but if you haven't got this, something like Xandri Dust is fine, or you can just paint it with Morghast Bone. For Vhordrai himself, I've primed this with Chaos Black and then given it a spray of Leadbelcher to get a nice silver finish, and I've also left the shield just in the Chaos Black colour. Now, the first thing I've done on Shordemaire, which unfortunately has come up with some corrupted footage, is I've taken a very big dry brush and stippled Ionrach Skin all over the areas where I want that greeny flesh. Now, this is a fairly easy, straightforward step. You just paint them with this colour. Once that's done, I'm going to shade it all down using Kroak Green. Now, the Kroak Green is nice and thin, and I want to spread this out as much as possible. This is going to give me this really nice undead greeny hue across it. We don't want it to settle too heavily in any of the recesses, so if it does, just wick it away before it starts to dry. Like I said, we just want to spread this out really nicely across the model. When that's completely dry, and it's really important that it's completely dry, I'm going to go back in with the Ionrach Skin, again with my very big dry brush. I'm just going to stipple and dry brush across all of those fleshy areas, leaving the Kroak Green in the recesses. So remember that first step that got some corrupted recording footage? This is exactly the same step, except I'm doing it over the Kroak Green, whereas in the first step, all we did was paint it over the primer colour. Once we're happy with how this is starting to come out, we'll go in with some Deepkin Flesh. And again, exactly the same technique, and I'm using exactly the same brush for this. I'm stippling and dry brushing across the model so I can bring out this nice brighter colour. I'm using my Artist Opus Series D dry brushes for this. And if you want to get your own, check the link in the description. And you can also get 5% off your order as well using my special code TPC. Once we finish dry brushing, it's time to go in and really accentuate some of those highlighted areas, particularly around the arms of the wings and the legs, and also around the neck a little bit. And what we'll do is take Deepkin Flesh, and we'll just use a normal brush for this. I'm using a size 3 Artist Opus Series S brush, and essentially I'm just going to highlight some of those areas, drag it along some of the edges, and get a really nice sharp highlight, because this will then, even though it's the same colour as the colour we dry brushed underneath, that will have had a little bit of Ionrach Skin in it. So this just gives you that pure highlight and really helps it stand out on the model. Next up, I'm going to start to build up some of those dark spots, which I think are a little bit like dry blood across the model, particularly where you've got the spines coming out of the back all the way along the body. And the colour I'm using for this is Targor Rageshade. Now, I haven't got a huge amount of this on the brush, and what I'm looking to do is just paint it in towards those spines, because what this will do, it'll make sure that the wash settles more in those areas, and it won't give too much of a harsh delineation as we're dragging the brush across. So work your way across all of the spines with this, again taking the brush from the greeny flesh into those spines, and that'll give you a nice transition. Now, to get the colour I wanted, I did need to put 2 coats on, so make sure you let that first one dry. To add a little more of a blood colour, I then took some Berserker Bloodhsade and used this only on the top of these areas, particularly where the spines are breaking out of the flesh. Again, this just gives you a nice reddy colour, which contrasts really nicely with the green of the body. I'm really not using very much paint here at all. Next up, I'm going to take some Volupous Pink contrast paint, and I'm going to use this to paint the inside of Shordemaire's mouth. Now, I'm going to paint the tongue, which is absolutely disgusting, and I'm also going to paint some of those gum areas as well. It's important at this stage to be quite careful, because the Volupous Pink is quite powerful, so we don't really want to spill it on any of the lighter areas. Whilst I've got that Volupous Pink out, I'm also going to work my way around the rest of Shordemaire, picking out all of these exposed areas of musculature and guts and everything. Now, it can be quite gross and gruesome in some of these areas, but there's plenty of patches along the neck, along the legs, along the back, and particularly on that left-hand side where there's a there's a gaping hole. There's no other way of saying it. There is a gaping hole that you need to paint as well. Just be careful not to spill this on the flesh. To add a little bit of differentiation to some of those disgusting gut areas, I'm going to take some Shyish Purple. And what I'm looking to do with this is paint it over anything that looks like an intestine or a tube. So we'll have the Volupous Pink on the musculature, and for all the more softer tissue, we'll have that dark Shyish Purple. Now, as you drag it, it should, I mean, it's quite disgusting, but it should also generate its own highlights with the colour underneath, so you don't need to go back to it after this. Now, I'm quite mindful that that Volupous Pink is not perfect in terms of giving a little bit of differentiation. It does all look very similar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a mix of Kislev Flesh and Volupous Pink, and this gives me a very light pinky fleshy colour. And what I'm going to do with this is just highlight the most exposed areas of that musculature just by dragging my brush along the shape to get some nice crisp highlights, and that's really going to help sell the look. It's also going to really help some of these parts stand out so it doesn't look like a pink blob on the tabletop. For the tongue, I'm going to take some Blood Angel's Red contrast paint and paint this all over it. This just gives it a slightly different colour to the gums around it, but I'm going to be careful around that musculature because we still want that Volupous Pink and that Volupous Pink Kislev Flesh highlighted area as well. Next, we're moving on to what could be the most time-consuming part of this particular model, so it might be worth watching this all the way through before you then go and actually attempt it yourself. So the first thing we're going to do is start to darken down the ends of the legs and paint the wing membranes. So the first colour we're going to use is a 50-50 mix between Sons of Horus Green and Ionrach Skin. What we're looking to do with this is firstly paint the majority of the wing membranes. That includes the spines because we'll lighten them up a little bit later on. And when it comes to the legs, we're going to start painting towards the bottom of the feet. So we're going to pick a point where we want the darker colour to start, and then we're going to paint all of the feet in this colour. Now we're going to base them all first. So this is going to be a little bit of a janky blend to start with, but we will work it all back together as we go through it. Once we've got that first layer down, we'll then take a layer of pure Sons of Horus Green and start to paint this further down the feet again. So what we're looking to do with this is, again, paint it towards the bottom of the feet in their entirety. I'm calling them feet, they're claws. But we're also looking to paint the wing membranes as well. So whereas we've started off with a lighter colour, we're now going to paint this towards the back end of the wings. So we'll start to build up that Sons of Horus Green as well. Now there's going to be a fairly definitive line between these transitions, but that's okay because we're going to fix that later on as we start to shade and highlight. Next up, we'll take a 50-50 mix of Sons of Horus Green and Lupercal Green. Now this is starting to get much darker, so we're really only going to focus this towards the toes of the claws and also to the back end of the wings. Again, you're going to have that fairly harsh line between the two colours depending on how you've mixed them, but that's okay, so don't worry about it too much at this point. The final colour we'll use at this stage is pure Lupercal Green. And for this, we're really only looking to use it towards the ends of the wings and the ends of the toes. So don't go too overboard with this because it is quite a powerful colour. But one of the big bonuses with it is it's fairly thin and its coverage is pretty poor, which means that you can actually get a nice transition using it. And you'll start to see that a little bit on the screen as the video's running. Next up, I wanted to add some shade and depth to these areas. So the colour I'm going to use for that is Poxwalker. Now this is a greeny, I want to say greeny blue, but it's not quite as greeny blue as something like Coelia Greenshade. But this is perfect for what we need. Just don't let it pull too heavily in the recesses. So if it does start to dry, then just wick it away. On the wing membranes, we're going to take this right up towards that Lupercal Green. Obviously, you won't see it on the Lupercal Green, so there's no need to put it on there. But it will just ease that transition ever so slightly as well. Now it's time to highlight up these areas. It's really important that Poxwalker is completely dry before we do this. And this is going to be a very time-consuming part of the model. So just get yourself prepared for that and don't expect this to be done really, really quickly. The first thing we're going to do is take some Ionrach Skin and we're going to start to highlight those wing membranes by painting lots of little lines along the vein areas, leaving that Poxwalker shade in the recesses. But what we're also looking to do is focus this more towards those spines. If you look at the box art, the spines are quite light all the way through, so we're going to replicate that a little bit. So you can see on the video, I'm just painting lots and lots and lots of little lines. And as this dries, it'll start to blend down into the colour underneath. So you'll start to build that highlight. I'm also going to highlight the spines in this area as well. And when it comes to those feet, I'm also going to build this in a little bit there because that's also going to help in terms of the transition through the colours. As you start to build this up, you really start to see the wing membranes coming to life. Now, don't forget, there are two sides to each wing, which is why I said it can be quite time consuming. Now, when it comes to the Ionrach Skin, we're just going to paint this along that first area where we put the 50-50 mix of Sons of Horus Green and Ionrach Skin. The next highlight is going to be a 50-50 mix of Sons of Horus Green and Ionrach Skin, and those amongst you will realise how this is going to go now. So we're going to carry on doing this across the wing membranes, working this up into the area where we've got that Sons of Horus Green. And this is going to really help us to build that transition and build that blend. It's not a bona fide blend, it's just going to be a visual blend that the eye is kind of tricked into seeing because of where all the highlights land. Again, we're leaving the darker colours in the recesses as we are working everything towards those spines, and we're going to highlight those spines as well. When it comes to the claws, exactly the same thing. We're just going to highlight in those areas where we've got the pure Sons of Horus Green. The next highlight is going to be with pure Sons of Horus Green, and we're going to use this across those wing membranes where we've got the Lupercal Green down. Now again, this is a nice easy step. We are going to just blend in towards those spines. We're going to leave the darker colour in the recesses, and we're just going to paint nice thin lines. Now again, the Sons of Horus Green is a nice thin paint, so as it dries it will blend down into the colour underneath. You may need to go back into some areas just to re-highlight if it's too thin, but generally this is a nice easy step, if a little time consuming. Again, for the claws, we're just going to highlight those bottom areas where we've got the pure Lupercal Green, and this should really help us get a nice smooth transition from the lighter to the dark colour. You can always go back in and rework this if you want to. Now, to lighten those spines up, I am just going to go back in with a little bit of the Sons of Horus and Ionrach Skin mix. And this is just going to be really nice in terms of dragging the brush up and down these areas. And this is going to be nice and simple, just painting lots of short little lines across these areas. As it dries, it'll blend down a bit as well, but it just helps accentuate the lightness working up through the wings. Then on top of that, I'm going to take a little bit of Ionrach Skin, and again, just painting lots and lots of little lines. This is really going to help to just highlight these areas, and it just reflects the box art where the spines are much lighter going all the way through the wings. The next step, which I've done off camera, is to just go back in and repaint all of the areas that are going to be bone. So if I made any mistakes or spillages, I've just gone in and tidied them up. To shade these, I'm going to use some Targor Rageshade. So all I'm doing is painting this across the bone areas, nice and easy, letting it settle in the recesses. I'm not putting it on too thickly. I'm not going to let it settle too heavily. I just want to make sure that it flows in there and gives me that really nice depth of shade. If it does start to pool heavily, then just go back in with your brush and wick it away before it dries. The first highlight we'll paint on the bone is with Morghast Bone. So this is going back to the base colour, and generally the bone areas are quite sharp. So what you can look to do is drag your brush along them, and this will give you a nice crisp highlight. So just take your time with this, leaving that brown Targor Rageshade in the recesses. This should be fairly easy and straightforward. Make sure you haven't got a huge amount of paint on your brush. When it comes to those spines, it should be much easier to drag your brush and get that nice crisp highlight. The last highlight on all of the bone is going to be with Screaming Skull, which is a nice bright bone colour. Now, what I'm looking to do with this is make sure that I get it inside the Morghast Bone highlight from the previous stage. So in particular, I'm looking to drag my brush across some of these really sharp edges. That gives me a nice crisp highlight. So again, we're working all the way across the model, making sure that we get all of the bits we need to with this. Do it fairly sparingly because it is so bright. We can always go back in and add more later on. Whilst I'm working on it, I'm going to get the eyes of Shordemaire done, so I'm just going to base these using a little bit of AK white. When that's dry, I'm going to pop some Blood Angels Red contrast paint over it, clean my brush off, and then just drag away some of that paint, leaving a nice little bit of a glow effect. It's very easy, it's very fake, but it does just sell the effect. So that is Shordemaire done, a fairly epic tutorial in itself. So let's move on to Vhordrai himself. Now, like I said, I sprayed this using Leadbelcher to get a nice bright silver. The first thing I'm going to do is take some Runelord Brass, and I'm going to stipple this all over the armour, because this is going to be the base for that metallic effect red armour that you can see on the box art. So I'm just going to stipple this all over using one of my really small Series D dry brushes. Once I've done the armor, I'm now going to base all of the other areas that I want to be a really old, brassy, kind of decrepit gold color. So I'm going to base them using Balthasar Gold. So in terms of what we're doing, we've got the two Draconiths on the back of his throne. We've also got that blood chalice in the front of the saddle and some other elements as well, such as the lance handle and all of the trim on his shield. I'm then going to shade all of these areas and the Runelord Brass on the armour using Coelia Greenshade. Now, this is what's going to start to really sell that old battered look. What I'm looking to do is just get this in the recesses. I'm not looking for it to pool too heavily. Essentially, what I'm doing is tinting these elements. So just work your way across the model, getting this done, making sure it's in those recesses. We're going to pop this all over the armour as well, because again, it's going to give us some of that shadow. Because it's a greeny colour, it's going to give us a nice contrast to the red that we're going to put on top of it later as well. I'm also going to shade all of the silver using the Coelia Greenshade as well. Now, you might think this is unusual, but when I look at the box art, it's just got that greeny blue hue to it. So I think, why not? We'll save a colour. We don't have to worry about null oil or anything like that. We'll just do it with the Coelia. Next up, we'll start to highlight everything using Runelord Brass. And what I'm looking to do here is drag the brush along those sharp edges, and that gives me some really nice crisp highlights. I'm also looking to drag it across the brass on the armour as well. And if I've got that Coelia Greenshade in any areas I don't want it, I can use this to make those corrections. Before we go any further, I want to block in some of the black elements, such as that billowing cloak, and also, if you have a look at Vhordrai himself, he's got a little bit of a black collar, and there's obviously some stirrups. Also, that part of the saddle where the chalice is seated, that also looks to be a little bit of a worn black colour. So the colour I'm using for all of this is Black Legion contrast paint. Now, in some areas, you may find it hydrophobic, so it'll bead up and not cover properly. If that's the case, we'll just need to let it dry and put a second coat on. It's now time to paint that red armour. So what I'm going to do is take a 50-50 mix of contrast medium and Baal Red contrast paint. Now, the key here is to make sure you haven't got a huge amount on your brush. You don't want to flood the model, but I'm now going to paint this all over those armour panels. Now, because we've used contrast medium, what you'll see is that it doesn't cover, it's not a very full red colour at all, but we are going to pick up a lot of the shadows from the underneath. So put this first colour down and then let it dry completely. Once that's completely dry, we're then going to go back in and really punch up the red a little bit by using the same mix we used in the last step. So it's a 50-50 mix of contrast medium and Baal Red. We're going to paint this again over that red armour, particularly in the areas that are facing upwards, where we really want that nice, colourful, bright red. Once that's completely dry, we'll start to highlight it a little bit just to give the impression of some wear and tear. And what we're looking to do is take a 50-50 mix of Canoptek Alloy and Baal Red contrast paint, and we're just looking to drag our brush across the edges of all this sharp armour. Now, this isn't going to give you a very crisp highlight. It'll give you a little bit of a patchy highlight, but that fits quite nicely into that worn, battered red aesthetic. So just work your way across all the model doing this. If after you've done it and you think, oh, do you know what? It's a little bit too pink. It's not quite how I like it. It's not very vivid. You can always go back in with that Baal Red and contrast mix and just paint over it just to punch the red back up. Next up, it's time to highlight all of the silver. Now, the colour I'm going to use for this is Surcoat Silver from Two Thin Coats. If you haven't got this, you can use something like Leadbelcher. Now, regular viewers will know that I always like to use dark aluminium from Vallejo Metal Colour. The reason I'm not using it for this is because that's very fluid and can run into recesses very easily. What I want is something that's a bit stiffer, just to make sure that I get a nice crisp highlight. So I'm going to stipple this across all of the silver, particularly on that saddle, just to give it a really battered, weathered look. I'm also going to drag it across the sharp edges of that black element on the saddle, because again, if you look at the box art, that looks to be fairly worn dark metal. And then when it comes to the lance, I'm just going to drag my brush along the sharp edges. To finish up the silver highlight, I'm going to take some chrome from Vallejo Model Air. If you've got Runefang steel or shining silver, again, just drag your brush and you get a nice crisp highlight. I'm not going to use a huge amount of this. I am going to use it fairly sparingly across the model because I do want to just maintain that really old, worn, battered, weathered look. With that done, let's highlight all the black elements. We'll start with the cloak because we're going to use an extra colour on the cloak just to ease that transition. And the colour I'm using for this is Corvus Black. Now what I'm looking to do is paint the majority of the cloak, thinking about which bits of it are going to be in the light. So really, I'm just going to leave the black lesion in the recesses. And the Corvus Black, which is a very, very, very dark grey, is just going to help ease that transition a bit. The next highlight we'll use is Eshin Grey. Now this is a great highlight colour because it's not very good when it comes to coverage, which means you can get a nice blend using it because as it dries it will just blend into the colour underneath. So what I'm looking to do with this is paint this into the cloak, again covering some of the similar areas we used with the Corvus Black in the previous stage, but I'm painting it out towards the edge of the cloak. And what this means, I'm going to deposit more paint towards the edge, so that's where it's going to be a bit more opaque, and that just gives me a little bit of a benefit, so I can get a nice transition from the Corvus Black into the Eshin Grey. I'm also going to use this to do some really crisp edge highlighting on things like the stirrups and the reins for Shordemaire. And to do this, I'm just going to drag my brush along the shape of the model to get those really nice crisp highlights. The final highlight we'll use on the black is with Dawnstone, and they do something very similar to the previous stage with this. So I'm looking to paint it across the cloak, pulling it towards those lighter edges. Now I did put a little bit too much on, but that's not so much of an issue, because if you've still got the Eshin Grey on your palette, you can just paint it over those edges and you'll get a nice smooth blend on it as well. And similarly, when it comes to the reins and the stirrups, I am just going to drag my brush across them to get that really nice crisp highlight. We'll base Vhordrai's head and that banner that he's got on his lance next, and the colour I'm going to use for this is Rakarth Flesh. Needless to say, we need to be careful around the areas we've already finished, so just take your time with this step. You may need 2 or 3 coats to get a really nice smooth base, but don't put the paint on too thickly, just let it dry and then go back in with another layer. To shade Vhordrai's face, we're going to take some Reichland Flesh shade. Now, I'm not going to paint this all over, I'm just going to focus this around his eyes, nose, mouth and his ears. And for the banner, I'm going to take some Ionrach Earthshade. I'm going to use this to cover the entirety of that banner, focusing it more so in those areas that I think are going to have some shadow. Once all those washes are completely dry, we'll go back in again with Rakarth Flesh and start to highlight back up. So for Vhordrai's head, we're looking to pick out things like his nose, cheekbones, his brow, the edges of his ears. If you're not sure which bits you're looking to paint here, then just check the Warhammer website, because there's a fantastic close-up of Vhordrai's face which shows you where the recesses are and where the shadow is. When it comes to the banner, we're just looking to paint the Rakarth Flesh back in, leaving the Ionrach Earthshade in all of the recesses. So take your time with this, don't rush it. You can drag your brush along the shape of the banner as well if you want, just to get some nice crisp highlights. The next highlight on the banner and on Vhordrai's face is going to be a 50-50 mix of Rakarth Flesh and Pallid Wych Flesh. Now for the banner, we're looking to just drag this across those sharp edges to get a nice highlight. There may be some areas that you want to completely paint with this colour. For Vhordrai, again, we're painting this inside the Rakarth Flesh highlight from the previous stage. So we're looking to get some nice, crisp, sharp highlights here. And this is just going to add a little bit of lightness in the centre of the model. Now, the banner on the box art has the Crimson Keep icon, which mimics what is on Vhordrai's shield. Now, I'm not going to freehand that for this tutorial. If you want to have a go at that, feel free. But what I am going to do is put a lot of the blood splatter that you can see on there. So the colour I'm using for this is Berserker Bloodhsade. And what I'm looking to do is just stipple this from the bottom end of that banner all the way up to where it finishes, looking at the box art. Looking at Vhordrai himself, I wasn't really happy when it came to the differentiation I had between the armour plates. So what I decided to do was just go back in with some Coelia Greenshade and just line this into all of those areas. So you do need to be careful with this, that you don't spill it over everything. But it does just help accentuate all the joins and recesses on these armour plates. And where we've got any studding and we've got some pock marks and everything like that, I can just reapply it to those areas just to give me a darker area, which gives me more interest on the model. So there we have it. Prince Vhordrai, Lord of the Crimson Keep, and his undead Draconith Shordemaire are done and ready for the tabletop. Now, this was an epic model which really did test my patience in some places. I'm really happy with the final result. If you did enjoy the video, please leave a like and a comment down below. It really does help spread this video across YouTube. Make sure you check out some of my other content here. I'd be really, really grateful, and I'll see you next time.